Welcome to Film Freaks. This is Justin Llewellyn.
And Eddie Williams.
Thank you so much for joining us for our spoiler discussion of Wonder Woman. We're going to be talking a little bit more in depth of things that we talked about in our previous review that was a non-spoiler that we'll go into about Wonder Woman. And for those of you who are curious about who haven't seen the film, you can feel free to check out our non-spoiler review of the film. But for those of you who have seen it already, tune in and we're going to go over a little bit more detail about Wonder Woman. So basically, the film it deals with Diana Prince, who, as we talked about, is portrayed by Gal Gadot. The movie actually starts out in modern times, which actually I thought was pretty cool because it takes place after Batman vs Superman, in how Bruce Wayne and her are looking for the Justice League, and Diana Prince is working on her own inside this antique department where she actually receives basically a photograph sent by Bruce Wayne.
Yep.
And basically that's when the movie shifts into recalling her past, where it goes into the backstory.
The picture reveals, it's kind of like Captain America: First Avenger, where the picture reveals in black and white her days where she was in World War I, and it has a picture of her and the soldiers that fought beside her during World War I.
Yeah. And then that was the same picture we saw in Batman vs Superman as well. And so the movie flashes back where we see Wonder Woman starts out as a girl who, as we discussed earlier, she is wanting to grow up and become a soldier like her mom and her aunt, because they grow into the Amazons called Themyscira. Yeah, she wants to be a strong warrior like her mom and her aunt. And her mom doesn't want to put her through it because she believes that, as we find out later in the film, that she is actually the son of the daughter of Zeus, who was the powerful god of lightning. He's actually the god of all gods. Yeah.
The god of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, and as we see, we actually go through quite a lot of bit of training for Diana this time, because in this film, because we see that she starts out still, even at a young age, she starts out trying to, do regular hand-to-hand combats, and then we see her later do shooting arrows and stuff, and then she learns how to use her sword. So they actually do have
Which I will say, I gotta praise those slow shots of them doing all these backflips and shooting arrows and stuff. It's really cool looking.
Well, yeah, and not just that, but it didn't feel like it was rushed, because I feel like they took enough time to actually do the backstory like that, where she actually is turning into an adult later. Because you know how you see other films where they kind of rush into those things and they go from childhood all the way to where she's already fighting in the war and shit. So
yeah, and then they just do flashbacks.
Yeah,
I don't like that structure.
Yeah,
that's kind of like what Man of Steel did.
Yeah, so with this one, they keep it very straightforward, where you're actually seeing her from as a young girl all the way to growing up. So I really enjoy that aspect. And then also we get actually a cool story about her, how she's talking about Zeus and everything, and she learns about Ares, who's known as the god of war. And there's actually a weapon that they use to. She learns that there's a weapon that's called the God Killer, which she pretty much Wonder Woman believes that it's a sword that can kill basically Ares, and
and which is for people who don't realize, Ares is actually in the Amazons world. Ares is actually one of the biggest villains of Wonder Woman's world, and he's pretty much killed off men.
Yeah. And that's the reason why
he made men kill each other.
Yeah, and that's the reason why pretty much now Themyscira is full of women instead of men. And as we discussed as we talked about Steve Trevor coming into play, basically when he crashes onto the coast, it was really weird, because I was kind of wondering how this one thing that did kind of throw me off was I was wondering how this world kind of works, with how. How he ends up coming into the land, but then all of a sudden the soldiers come up too. I was wondering if there was some kind of boundary like that, because you notice that they could pretty much just enter.
You're led to believe, and I'm wondering if this is true. I'm wondering if the entrance to her alternate universe is through the Bermuda Triangle or some shit.
Possibly, but basically, as we see later in the film, we get.
Which is funny, because before we continue, I've not really been much of a Wonder Woman fan, so I didn't know much about her. I don't know hardly much about her compared to the rest of the DC
I did too, because if I remember, now keep in mind, it's been years since I've seen it, but the first cartoon that got me introduced to Wonder Woman about more of her backstory was when she was in Justice League, the original cartoon show, where we actually learned more about. If I remember, I think in that show they actually made it to where she did come from a homeworld planet that wasn't actually basically part of Earth. But anyway, basically this film reveals that she has to team up with Steve Trevor after an event that happens where pretty much the Germans pretty much show up looking for Steve Trevor because he's an undercover officer. And when the Germans show up, they pretty much break war out on the shores, and that's when we see that very tragic sacrifice.
They're after him because he stole Dr. Poison's book on how to make a poisonous gas that will kill the world.
Yeah, and that's why what causes Diana to go with Steve Trevor into play after a tragic event happens where after the men show up and try to kill Steve and kill the rest of the Amazons, they engage, and then all of a sudden you see Diana's aunt die. She gets killed after she protects Wonder Woman, which is sad because you actually do feel for I actually felt for that character too. And
no, it was a pretty emotional scene.
Yeah, and then with you know what was really cool about this one too that I found really unique that I haven't really noticed before. This film is actually the first time of anything that I know about Wonder Woman where her lasso is actually used for truth. It's basically like a truth serum, basically.
Yep.
Which I thought was very fascinating because you know in the past I always thought that Wonder Woman's lasso was just like, you know, she traps her enemies and it's strong. But apparently this film actually shows, at least maybe it's in the comics too, that you can pretty much tie anyone up and they'll tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So
it was pretty funny because he was sitting there trying to lie, but it was hurting him and Rorik and had to tell the truth. I also thought you remember where he was all disoriented in that. There's a pretty scene where he's in that kind of like that spa.
Yeah.
That blue spa. Those were visually pretty. I was like, it was kind of like an Avatar world.
Yeah, definitely. But anyway, yeah. But
and it was funny because he was naked and she was all like, you know, never seen a man's dick before. Or something.
Yeah.
Like
yeah. And as we see, you know, as the plot goes along, we discover that Wonder Woman is having to.
Well, the thing is, the motive to Wonder Woman, to why she wants to come into this world, is he talks about a great war that is happening and it's killing the world, and she starts thinking about flashbacks of her aunt telling her about a backstory about Ares, the god of war, who pretty much try to wipe them out, would come back eventually down the road and do it again. So,
yeah.
Basically, she wants to go with Tyler to his world to stop this war and destroy Ares.
Yeah, and when
she believes Ares resides in this world.
Yeah, which I actually, you know, that does make sense. Yeah, and when we get to, and it's funny because when she actually enters the world with Chris Pratt's character, or I'm sorry, Chris Pine's character, it basically becomes kind of like a reverse Captain America, because in this time she's actually learned about having to work in society and things like that, having to dress up and trying to basically we get that funny part where she's trying to carry her sword and her shield around and he's like no, you can't take that out there. So yeah, so this film does do the whole fish out of water story like we saw in other films, but I thought it still worked because knowing why she has to come into this world, into our world, and to stop Ares makes sense in this regard. Another thing.
You got three villains in this. You got Gudenolf, or whatever his name is.
His name is Ludendorff. Ludendorff.
You got Dr. Poison, which Tyler is kind of focusing on them, while she's after just Ares.
Yeah, and then basically as we see along too, we get to discover other things about Dr. Poison as well, how she's having this gas that can pretty much kill people even when they wear gas masks on. And you know what's really engaging with this storyline is with this, when Diana Prince is going with Steve Trevor and his gang, you actually see a lot of you actually feel the damage of war that she sees in her eyes like we do. like the scenes where they go into no man's land and she's seen all the innocent people killed. That really motivates her a lot to actually become more, helping people out and trying to stop this war.
Oh yeah, because she's sitting there watching like how everybody's just killing each other, and she knows deep down, Ares has got something to do with it.
Yeah.
And it emotionally destroys her.
Yeah, and then earlier in the film too, we forgot to mention that there's also another character called Sir Patrick Morgan, played by David Thewlis, who we'll get to later. But basically, he's the one who actually sets up the Steve Trevor and the men and Diana to go on this mission, and but the thing is with him though, they don't really spend a whole lot of time with him, which I kind of found a little bit jarring in some parts.
The dude from Harry Potter.
Yeah, the guy who played Lupin.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I do. There were some cons I didn't mention in the spoiler free, which is starting to come to light, and I'm going to mention it when we start laying down our pros and cons. Yeah, they don't. He was just in that little scene in the office where they're like kind of like discussing certain things about the war and because he's talking about like just trying to. He's in a discussion about how they're going to surrender and all that shit. And yeah, that basically you don't see him again. But that's where you start questioning this, because when you have main actors, A-list actors like him, and they're only in like that little part scene, they're going to be doing something big. In the end, he might be the part of it.
Yeah, and when the movie goes along too, you see the other like dynamics that motivates Diana more, because basically this film deals with Diana Prince having to see what war is truly like, but also you actually get to see how her powers grow more. Like how when we first see her start using her powers in the beginning, when she uses her famous shield reflector, that you can tell that she's kind of scared at first because she doesn't want to hurt anyone. But then when you see the damage that's causing everyone around, that's what really I felt is where the strongest point is for this character is how much war can really tear a person up. And not just that, but what really helps too is that when we get to, not trying to skip ahead or anything because it's pretty straightforward. When you see a lot of the development growing between Steve Trevor and Diana Prince, that really grows an effect on our climax where we get to basically we see that Diana is having to infiltrate the main base where the Germans are, and we see that throughout the whole film there's like this weird drug that the general was taking, and I kept wondering what the fuck that was, if it was like turning him into something.
And see, that's the problem, and we'll get to more of our cons later. It's little shit like that makes you think it's going to lead to something. Like, you thought he was going to become some kind of big-time strong machine, because when he took this drug, it made him punch through, like, steel and break shit.
Yeah.
And it's like, they don't really even use that even whenever he's really fighting her, other than a split second, which was like, like, I don't get his, like, other than him just being a plain old soldier that was part of the war, it just felt like he was just so standard.
Yeah, which, according to what I've read so far, Erich Ludendorff, was a real-life German general in World War One.
Yeah.
So it was cool that they took an alternate approach from him. So I do like the things that they do for this character, at least for the drug he takes. But the thing is, it's very underused because when he has that fight with Wonder Woman, it feels kind of pointless because she kind of overmatches him.
Well, yeah.
I mean, but then again, that's where.
After all, you got him and Dr. Poison, who are pretty much human beings. But anyways, you get through the story as you go. You start seeing more emotional scenes, especially whenever that Gutendorf ended up shooting that bomb on that village.
Yeah, that was. I know that.
You see her crying.
Yeah, that was really messed up, and that was a great emotional scene right there with Gal as Wonder Woman. You can really see the emotion in her eyes.
We still got to bring up about Tyler and his team.
Yeah, Trevor and his team that, as we discussed.
Keep calling Tyler Trevor.
Yeah. With Trevor and his team, it's really cool that this film actually gives us a lot of depth with these characters, because each character has like their own personality that fits into play of what Charlie, who's the sharpshooter, you have Samir, who's the secret agent, you have the Native American, who is basically he basically trades off both sides of the war, and he just basically goes along with the journey. Because really, he doesn't really have much. Yeah, he doesn't really have much alike than compared to the other ones, but it's still, you still feel the emotion and everything with these characters in a way that I find very fascinating. But also,
what I really found strong with it is it was actually very cool that you get these side characters that could be so much impact in a film. You get they got, not only do they got great chemistry with comedy, where they kind of banter a little bit and they can say some jokes and just kind of diss each other, but you can also see how they're trying to bring happiness in a dreadful situation, where they're trying to be normal and just have fun, but at the same time, you can see deep down, you have scenes where she's like really looking at them, and you can tell they're scared, and it's a dark situation, so they're trying to make the best of it.
Yeah, and then
So I thought that was pretty good.
yeah, it was, and this is where we get to pretty much our climax that involves the. Basically, we have at first it's kind of throws you off to think that Ludendorff and Dr. Poison are the main bad guys, but then after Diana pretty much kills the general, we pretty much see that there was a later reveal that David Thewlis's character turns out to be Ares the whole time, who actually inspired those two characters along the entire film, and
he inspired him and shows him kind of like a ghost, where he's kind of like giving him ideas to do shit to start the war.
yeah.
And basically, the reason why he let Diana live at the beginning is he was hoping that she would see the fault in a human being and she would join him.
Yeah, which I do like his motivation of where it went, but my only thing is, because we didn't really get a lot to do with this character and we kind of build up to it,
You don't get him until the end.
that's what I'm saying. I felt like his whole payoff just felt very standard, because we spent all this time trying to see, and other than the fact that he wants to cause destruction and he wants to cause global alliance or global destruction, basically to become for Diana and everything. I just felt like that was just so standard and stuff we've seen countless times that I felt like it should have been something more impactful.
It's not only that. Ares is like a big villain in Wonder Woman's history, and unlike Superman and all them, where you got Zod throughout the film, that's like having Zod only at the end of the movie.
Well,
so it's like you took one of her big villains, and he only is the villain at the end.
Well, yeah, and
Which kind of was like, oh man.
well, in that's the thing too, was that in Man of Steel, even though Zod didn't really have a big part in the film, he still was in a majority of the third act. This one, they basically put him in at the last 20 minutes and did that, where they kind of pulled a doomsday on us. You know?
Well, not only that, and this is where I kind of blame the trailers on. You really are led to believe throughout watching the trailers and then going into this, you were thinking there was going to be something big with Dr. Poison.
Yeah, I know. We don't get any climax of her, because after we see that Diana defeats Ares, and he actually gains the armor, which I thought was cool, how Ares actually gains his armor based on metal and everything that's off of these buildings and stuff, which I thought was cool. Yeah. So I thought that was cool, but after Diana pretty much defeats Ares, Dr. Poison we never see her again after that. I don't know.
Well, no, you see where Diana finally gets into her rage and she starts picking the thing up, and then pretty much Dr. Poison is all crying, oh, don't hurt me now, and then she just lets her run and leave, and that's it. And I thought she was gonna be this big ninja warrior type woman, and she was gonna fight Diana in this movie.
Yeah. Either that or
well, that's a question.
Well, and plus, I don't remember if it showed that she went to prison or what, because we never see her again after that. I'm like, okay, well, you just let your enemy go, so there's a chance that she might come back for another army or something.
Yeah, so it's they could have at least showed us a closure where it shows her being taken away in cuffs or something.
Yeah, or at least show what her plan is, because unless they're building that up for a sequel or something, we don't know.
Yeah.
But other than that, though, and also one of the biggest emotional parts that got to me was the part where we see, during this climax, we see that Chris Pine's character is in his men or infiltrating the base and everything, and to basically to get rid of the gas, there's a plane that's carrying all the gas that's going to be spread around the world. And in order to destroy it, Trevor has to get inside this plane in order to take it out. And when he does,
well, he has to take it out because it's on a timer, so he has no choice. So when he flies it where it's far away from any person that can breathe this stuff in, he ends up having to sacrifice himself by pulling it up.
yeah, and when he does, that actually got a big like jaw drop for me. I was just kind of like, I wasn't in tears, but I was just, I felt the emotions there. I was like, man, I can't.
I think that was probably the movie's strongest emotional scene.
Yeah, and then you could see a lot of the tears in Diana's eyes, Godot really captured that performance well, and so what's cool about that? Well, what's a good sacrifice?
Well, not only that, him dying just made her freak out the hardest, where she was able to kick Ares' ass.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, and that basically, in an unironic way, love basically beats Ares. Now, you could say that's probably cliche because they've done that in several movies and everything, but I feel like this actually works because that fully does motivate Wonder Woman of who she is. So I can buy that. I can really buy that.
Yeah.
And so, but anyway, but basically we get that she defeats Ares, and after she shocks him with his own power and everything. And basically, after that, we get an honorable death of Chris Pine's character, where he's basically shown on the poster and everything when they walk by, and the war basically ends. So after that, the war ends, and then we see that he's listed on a poster in his honor.
It shows after she kills Ares. It shows a German soldier stand up next to one of Trevor's soldier guys. And pretty much they're just hugging each other because there ain't nothing that's brainwashing them into believing they need to kill each other.
Yeah. And then after that, it shows, it cuts back to present day where we see that Diana is replying to the email that Bruce Wayne sent her about her photograph that she received. And we see that she gets called into action again. She goes to get back into gear.
No, she's sitting there typing and all that stuff and writing to him, and then she hears explosions going off, and then that's when she puts on her suit.
Yeah. So, and then basically you get the idea that leads directly into Justice League.
Yep.
And so, overall, yeah, I really do highly enjoy this film a lot. It's definitely...
Oh, yeah, I enjoyed this story. I think it's, like I said, the spoiler-free, that as far as story structure, I think this is the best out of the DC universe, but I still believe that Batman vs. Superman and Suicide Squad, as far as popcorn entertaining, was funner to watch. I had a blast watching, though those movies were heavily flawed. But this one was as far as really good story and a great way to do an origin story, this did it really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were more memorable moments I liked better in some of the other films, but I still highly enjoyed the action, the way it worked in the context of the story.
Cinematography was beautiful. Where they showed the world was really pretty. The war scenes were really authentic, like watching a Saving Private Ryan type thing. Those were pretty good. We've already said the chemistry is so perfect for everybody in this film. So that's as far as my pros. As far as my cons, I did leave out a con that I did not mention in my previous review. This one kind of bothered me because it reminded me of a movie I watched in the mid-2000s that got a lot of shit, and I can agree with this. I found it weird that the Germans were speaking perfect English.
It kind of reminded you of Valkyrie?
Valkyrie with Tom Cruise did that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was...
I was watching a poorly made German.
Yeah, I could see that, because the translation kind of goes back and forth. So... I can see that could be something, but I guess that didn't bother me too much.
Yeah, and then as far as another couple cons, we were going into detail earlier in this review about Dr. Poison and Gutenhoff. We don't know much about them. They were still standard, and then the fact that Ares was a big the final boss, but we don't get him till the fucking end, kind of was like, oh man, like their building up villain structure was
Yeah, if I think that if they would have made a more compelling like villain who's at least throughout the film, I could probably see a bit more because it did feel like it was a last minute thing where they just threw a villain in there and that was it. Now I do like his motivation more, but yeah, that villain I felt was so underdeveloped and he just did he just it just basically became a different movie altogether. You know, it's like the first two thirds.
Especially because when he has a suit, it does feel like a totally different movie of what you were watching earlier. But that dude from Harry Potter that plays him, Ares, in this, because that dude's name was so big and he was getting promoted in the trailers a lot, and the fact that I noticed he was gone after a few minutes in the beginning made me to believe that he was the villain in the end.
Yeah, and while I enjoy his performance, I just felt like his character was very, very not so good with his dynamic, or I'm sorry, his plan basically. So with that, other than also the other con I had with the 3D too, that was really my only minor things I had with the film. Because other than that, I loved everything else about this film. This is what you do with an origin story. The performances were good. The action, while it's not quite as memorable as the other ones, it still is great. And with that, and the visuals are outstanding as well. And so,
this movie had really outstanding visuals, but it also had fighting scenes, but it had really good slow-mo action scenes.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I actually really enjoyed the score as well. I thought the score, and plus it was cool hearing that kick-ass theme song again from Batman vs Superman.
Yeah, her theme.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, with that, overall, there's more I could go into detail with, but that's really the gist of it. Overall, I still give the movie a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you and go 9 out of 10.
Fair enough. For those of you who have seen Wonder Woman, let us know in the comments what you guys thought of it, and if you like what you see here, you can check out more of our reviews here, and we'll be seeing you in our next one. We'll see you later.